Long before the sails of Europe ever crossed the horizon, there was another world, a world of mountains that scraped the clouds, rivers that ran for 1,000 miles, and empires that rose and fell in complete isolation. This was the Americas of the Middle Ages, a parallel civilization unseen by the rest of humanity. When Europe struggled through feudal wars and plagues, when Asia built dynasties and trade empires, across the ocean a different story unfolded. One shaped by maize instead of wheat, obsidian instead of steel, and gods born of rain, fire, and jaguar. Between the 5th and the 15th centuries, the Americas were alive with cities, calendars, and kings. Their people built pyramids that touched the sky, terraced mountains into gardens, and mapped the heavens with mathematics. In 500 AD, the Americas were already ancient. The descendants of hunters who had crossed from Asia thousands of years earlier had filled the land from the Arctic to Patagonia. But unlike Eurasia, there were no great crossroads, no Silk Roads or Roman empires to tie it together. Each region became its own experiment in civilization. The north was a tapestry of tribes, forests, and rivers, a world of trade and migration. The middle latitudes in Mesoamerica held kingdoms that rivaled anything in medieval Europe. And in the Andes, on the roof of the world, societies mastered engineering centuries ahead of their time. The continents were isolated but not stagnant. Trade moved through networks of rivers and trails. Shells from the Pacific found their way inland, obsidian from Mexico reached Guatemala, and copper from the Great Lakes gleamed in the hands of chiefs 1,000 miles away. Civilization had found its rhythm, steady, spiritual, and deeply bound to the earth. In North America, the story began quietly. From the Mississippi River to the Gulf of Mexico, communities were growing into something new. Farmers cultivated maize, beans, and squash, the three sisters, that would sustain millions for centuries. By 600 AD, great mound builders were shaping the landscape. Their cities were marked by enormous earthen pyramids, plazas, and astronomical alignments. One day, these traditions would culminate in the city of Cahokia, near present-day St. Louis, a metropolis larger than London in its time. Farther west in the deserts of the southwest, the ancestral Puebloans carved homes into cliffs and built kivas, circular chambers aligned with the sun. Their villages, Chaco Canyon, Mesa Verde, and hundreds more were linked by roads straight as arrows. In the cold north, Inuit and Aleut peoples thrived where few could survive, mastering sea ice, whales, and the endless twilight. Their tools were as sophisticated as any in the world, evidence of ingenuity shaped by necessity. The Americas were not waiting for discovery. They were already discovered by their own people. While Europe was entering its early Middle Ages, in the rainforests of Central America, cities of stone and color rose from the jungle canopy. This was the golden age of the Maya. From 600 to 900 AD, they built a constellation of city-states: Tikal, Palenque, Calakmul, Copan. Each ruled by dynasties that recorded their triumphs on stelae of carved limestone. They mapped the planets with mathematical precision, invented a true written language, and measured time across millennia. Their pyramids rivaled Egypt's in scale and symbolism, designed not as tombs, but as stairways to the heavens. The Maya understood the cycles of Venus, the eclipses of the moon, and the exact length of the solar year, all without metal, beasts of burden, or wheels. It was not an empire but a galaxy of nations, each bound by religion, trade, and rivalry. Yet by the 900s the great cities began to fade. Climate change, over-farming, and civil war brought decline. But the Maya did not vanish. They adapted, migrating north toward the Yucatan, where new powers would soon emerge. After the Maya world dimmed, a new fire lit the central Mexican plateau. From around 900 AD, the Toltecs rose in the valley of Tula. They built temples lined with stone warriors, staring toward the horizon with obsidian eyes. The Toltecs were builders, traders, and warriors. Their influence spread across Mesoamerica. Their art, religion, and legends would later inspire the Aztecs themselves. To later generations, Toltec became a word for wisdom, craftsmanship, and nobility, much like Roman in Europe. And from their ruins, myths would grow. Tales of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god who would one day return. Meanwhile, thousands of kilometers away, in the shadow of the Andes, another cradle of civilization was thriving. Long before the Inca, cultures like the Moche and Nazca had already mastered irrigation and artistry. By 600 AD, new powers emerged: the Wari near the highlands of Peru and the Tiwanaku near Lake Titicaca. The Wari built roads and planned cities with precision, their influence spreading across valleys and mountains. The Tiwanaku carved monumental temples, worshipped sun and stone, and traded across altitudes from jungle to desert. Together they created the blueprint for what the Inca would later inherit: the concept of a centralized multi-ethnic empire governed through roads, labor, and reciprocity. By the time Europe reached its high Middle Ages, the Andes already had their own. From Alaska to the Amazon, civilization in the Americas evolved without iron, without the wheel, and without the horse, yet achieved miracles of architecture, astronomy, and agriculture. While castles rose in France and cathedrals in Rome, pyramids stood silent beneath tropical storms, their carvings tracing gods that no outsider would know for 1,000 years. This was a world entirely its own, unmeasured, unrecorded by the rest of humanity, but as rich and layered as any civilization in history. And it was still growing, because by the year 1000, new cities were rising again, in the jungles, on the mountains, and along the great rivers. The story of medieval America was only halfway told. By the year 1000, the forests and rivers of North America were alive with movement. The land was dotted with villages and towns, their people bound together not by kings or empires, but by trade, story, and ritual. To the south, in the valleys of the Mississippi, a new kind of civilization was forming, one that looked nothing like the castles of Europe or the temples of Mesoamerica, but held the same mystery of purpose and power. Near the confluence of the Mississippi and Missouri rivers rose Cahokia, the largest city north of Mexico. At its height around 1100 AD, it covered more than 10 square kilometers, a true metropolis of its time. Tens of thousands of people lived there, farmers, artisans, and spiritual leaders who gathered to build something monumental. They raised earthen pyramids, more than 100 in all, arranged around vast plazas and aligned with the sun. The largest, Monk's Mount, rose higher than a 10-story building. It was the center of ceremony and governance, a place where the earth itself had been shaped to reflect the heavens. Cahokia's people observed the stars from a great circle of posts, a woodhenge, that marked solstices and equinoxes. They grew maize in the fields beyond, crafted shell ornaments, and traded copper, mica, and obsidian brought from distant lands. And then, as mysteriously as it appeared, it declined. By the 1300s the plazas were empty, the mounds overgrown. Perhaps floods, famine, or social collapse drove its people away. But its memory lingered, passed through oral traditions, the city where the earth touched the sky. Cahokia was not alone. Across the eastern woodlands stretched a network of mound-building cultures, from the Ohio River to the Gulf of Mexico. Each site had its own rhythm, its own purpose. Some were towns, others sacred centers where the living met the spirits of their ancestors. Trade routes tied them together like threads of invisible silk. Copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Atlantic, obsidian from the Rockies. All passed from hand to hand, village to village. The exchange was not only of goods, but of beliefs and ceremonies. Stories traveled with the traders, of animal spirits, celestial beings, and the underworld below the rivers. Through story, the vast continent remained connected, a spiritual unity where no empire ruled. West of the great rivers stretched the endless grasslands, the plains. Here, life was bound to the bison. Hunting tribes followed their migrations, using every part of the animal, meat for food, hides for shelter, bones for tools. Contrary to modern images, the horse had not yet arrived. People traveled on foot, carrying goods in wooden frames called travois, pulled by dogs. The plains were not barren. They were crossroads. From the forests came pottery and shells, from the mountains came obsidian and turquoise. At meeting grounds like the Black Hills, tribes exchanged gifts, stories, and marriages, weaving bonds stronger than borders. Farther southwest, in the sun-baked mesas of what is now New Mexico and Arizona, the ancestral Puebloans reached their height. Their cities, Chaco Canyon, Mesa Verde, and Wupatki, were marvels of stone and symmetry. Chaco, the heart of the region, was a city of ceremonial roads and great houses aligned with lunar cycles. Its largest structure, Pueblo Bonito, contained hundreds of rooms, built with precision that rivaled any European monastery of the same era. Trade caravans carried turquoise, macaw feathers, and copper bells from Mexico. Religion, astronomy, and craftsmanship were inseparable. Life itself was a ceremony. But by the 1200s the rains began to fail. Drought and famine scattered the people across the Four Corners region. They became the ancestors of today's Hopi and Zuni, who still preserve the memory of that golden time in their songs. To the north, across the subarctic forests and frozen coasts, life followed another rhythm. The Inuit and Aleut mastered a world of ice and wind. They built boats of sealskin, houses of snow, and tools of bone with artistry born of survival. Their harpoons could strike a moving whale. Their sleds glided over frozen rivers as smooth as steel. In their language there were dozens of words for snow, each describing a different mood of the earth. To the east, along the coasts of Canada and New England, maritime peoples like the Beothuk and Micmac hunted seals and fished in icy waters, crafting stories of spirits that lived in waves and storms. For them the sea was not a barrier, it was a road. By 1300 AD, North America was a symphony of life. Cities, villages, and tribes moving in cycles of abundance and struggle. Some built monuments to the stars, others carved prayers into canyon walls. Each believed their land was sacred, that the earth itself breathed and spoke. There were no kings of all America, no single empire to record their history. Yet their memory endured. not in books or stone inscriptions, but in the continuity of their descendants. When the first European ships would one day appear on distant shores, these civilizations would seem invisible to foreign eyes. But in truth, they were vast, sophisticated, and complete, a mirror to the old world, reflecting its own kind of greatness. By the turn of the millennium, the heart of the Americas, the lands we now call Mexico and Central America, glowed with the pulse of civilization. Stone cities rose among jungles and plateaus, and the air shimmered with the smell of burning copal, maize, and rain. Here, time itself was sacred. The calendar was not merely a tool, it was a heartbeat of the universe. The people who lived under it believed the gods had built and destroyed the world many times before, and might do so again. Every dawn was a renewal of creation, every sunset a quiet end of the world. After centuries of brilliance, the great Maya cities of the southern lowlands had faded into forest silence. But farther north, new powers emerged. In the limestone plains of the Yucatan, cities like Uxmal, Mayapan, and Chichen Itza thrived between 1000 and 12,000 AD. Here the Maya mingled with the Itza and other peoples of Mexican ancestry, blending art, language, and religion into something new. Chichen Itza became a city of pyramids and colonnades, with temples that caught the sun precisely at equinox, when a serpent of light slithered down the steps of El Castillo. In their courts, astronomers observed the stars with instruments of stone and memory, predicting eclipses and charting Venus, the morning and evening star that ruled their calendar. Their temples were decorated with carvings of warriors, serpents, and celestial jaguars. Each symbol carried meaning, each god carried time. But as centuries passed, even this renaissance dimmed. By the 1400s, many Maya cities had fallen again into silence, their descendants living in scattered towns, keeping the language and the lore alive while the jungles reclaimed the stone. Yet, like the embers of a fire, the Maya world never truly died. In the highlands of central Mexico, around the same time, the Toltecs built their capital at Tula. Massive stone columns stood in ranks, warriors of eternal vigilance, carved with spears, butterflies, and serpents. Their temples bore murals of jaguar priests and sacred fire. The Toltecs believed the cosmos was a fragile balance between creation and destruction, a balance that required human blood. Their legend spoke of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, god of knowledge and light. He was said to have ruled as a benevolent king, only to be betrayed and exiled to the east, a story that would echo for centuries in the myths of later peoples. Tula's influence spread far, its artisans traded obsidian and turquoise, its soldiers marched as far as the Gulf. But by the 1200s, drought and warfare broke the city's heart. When it fell, its stories became myth, and those myths became the inheritance of the next great civilization to rise from the Valley of Mexico. Around the 13th century, wandering tribes from the north arrived in the central highlands. They called themselves Mexica, children of the sun and of the god Huitzilopochtli. For generations they were nomads, serving as mercenaries and settlers for stronger kingdoms. But prophecy guided them. They were to build their home where they found an eagle perched on a cactus, devouring a serpent. In 1325 they found it, on a swampy island in the Lake Texcoco. There they built Tenochtitlan, a city that would become the jewel of the Americas. Its streets ran with canals like Venice, its temples gleamed with paint and gold. At its heart stood the Templo Mayor, twin pyramids rising above the water, dedicated to the sun and the rain. By the 1400s, the Aztecs had forged an empire that stretched from the Gulf of Mexico to the Pacific. Through war, tribute, and alliance, they commanded millions. Their markets overflowed with cacao, cotton, jade, and obsidian. Their scribes recorded history in painted codices. Their poets spoke of flowers and death as twin forms of beauty. But the Aztec world was also one of shadows, a world where sacrifice fed the cosmos. They believed the sun required human hearts to rise each morning. To them it was not cruelty, but duty, a cosmic debt repaid. Every festival, every victory, every calendar cycle was a reenactment of creation itself. The Maya, the Toltecs, the Aztecs, each built upon the last, not by inheritance but by inspiration. Their cities rose and fell like constellations, lighting the land for a time before fading into darkness. Each left behind art, language, and gods that spoke of balance, of life and death, rain and fire, time and renewal. To walk among their ruins today is to feel the hum of eternity. Stone stairways still lead upward, though no priest climbs them now. The carvings still whisper of storms, serpents, and kings who once ruled the rhythm of the sky. Between the year 1000 and 1500 AD, Mesoamerica became one of the most advanced regions on Earth, not through conquest but through culture. Its people built a world governed by harmony with the elements and reverence for the past. When Europe would one day arrive, they would not find an untamed wilderness, but a civilization as old and intricate as their own. While Europe built cathedrals of stone and Asia painted silk with empires, the people of the Andes carved their civilization into the bones of the earth. They did not conquer nature, they worked with it, weaving their world from stone, soil, and sky. From Colombia to Chile stretched a chain of civilizations, each rising in the shadow of the last, culminating at the very end of the Middle Ages in one of the greatest achievements in human history, the Inca Empire. But centuries before the Inca, the highlands and coasts already pulsed with life and innovation. Around the year 1000, the great highland empires of Wari and Tiwanaku had begun to fade. Their cities, once alive with artisans, priests, and farmers, now stood quiet under the sun. But they left behind something greater than monuments: ideas. They had mastered terraced farming, irrigation canals, and roads that climbed impossible slopes. They proved that unity could exist across the most unforgiving terrain. Their influence lingered in pottery, textiles, and the geometry of architecture. Even centuries later, Inca engineers would follow their example, connecting cities with roads that could survive earthquakes and storms. In a land where the mountains ruled, the people learned to build as if the mountains themselves were allies. After the Wari and Tiwanaku faded, the Andes became a mosaic of smaller kingdoms and cultures. The Chimu, Chachapoya, Lupaca, Aymara, and dozens more. On the northern coast of Peru, the Chimu Empire rose in the city of Chan Chan, the largest adobe city in the world. Its walls stretched for kilometers, carved with waves and fish to honor the sea. The Chimu were masters of irrigation and metallurgy, crafting gold and silver into delicate ornaments that shimmered like sunlight on water. In the misty cloud forests farther inland, the Chachapoya, the warriors of the clouds, built fortresses on mountain ridges and buried their dead in cliffside tombs. Their world was green, damp, and filled with mystery, a bridge between the Andes and the Amazon. Each culture found its own rhythm with the land. Some followed rivers, some climbed mountains, all built with purpose to endure. High in the valley of Cusco, sometime around the early 1200s, a small kingdom began to gather strength. It was led by a people who called themselves the Inca, children of the sun god Inti. They were few at first, a single valley among dozens, but through diplomacy, warfare and divine vision, they expanded outward, uniting the fractured Andes into one vast empire. By the 1400s, under the rule of Pachacuti, the Inca realm had become the largest in the pre-Columbian Americas, stretching 4,000 kilometers along the spine of South America. It was called Tawantinsuyu, the land of the four quarters. Its roads crossed deserts, jungles, and glaciers. Its bridges hung over canyons deeper than cathedrals. Every stone in their cities fit perfectly into the next, no mortar, no gaps, as if cut by the gods themselves. Cusco became the navel of the world, its streets arranged like a puma, its temples lined with gold. Above all stood Machu Picchu, a city hidden among clouds, terraces of green and grey, where sun and shadow met in perfect silence. It was both sanctuary and symbol, the summit of Andean harmony. The Inca world was not built on wealth or conquest alone, but on reciprocity, a philosophy called Aini, meaning today for you, tomorrow for me. Communities worked together on royal projects, building terraces, roads, and temples that served all. There was no coin, no private land, instead labor was the currency of loyalty. The empire provided food from state storehouses, shelter for travelers, and order through an intricate web of governors, priests, and engineers. The Inca measured time through stars and rituals. They tracked the heavens from stone towers, predicting solstices that guided their harvests. They built with precision so great that even today their walls withstand earthquakes that destroy modern cities. By the 15th century, the Andean world stood at its peak. Caravans of llamas carried goods along royal highways. Messengers, chasquis, sprinted across mountains with knotted cords of information called quipus, a system of record-keeping unmatched in elegance. Temples gleamed with gold not as currency, but as the sweat of the sun, sacred offerings to Inti, to Pachamama, the earth, and to Viracocha, the creator. In the cities, stone walls shone in the light of dawn. On the terraces, maize and potatoes grew in endless rows, reaching toward heaven, and through it all, the empire hummed like a living organism, united, patient, vast. The Inca did not think of themselves as conquerors. They believed they were restoring order to a world already sacred. To build was to honor creation itself. And then, without warning, the age of the Andes would end, not by its own decay, but by the arrival of a world it had never seen. But that is another story, a story of collision, faith, and fire. The 15th century, across the Atlantic, kingdoms fought and traded, empires rose and fell, and maps were being redrawn by explorers who believed the edge of the world still waited to be found. But here in the vast lands of the Americas, time followed its own rhythm, steady, circular, untouched by the storm gathering beyond the sea. The world was complete. It did not yet know it was about to end. In the forests and plains of North America, societies thrived quietly in the rhythm of the seasons. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy, known later as the Iroquois, had united powerful nations under a great law of peace. Their council fires burned in longhouses where decisions were made not by kings, but by consensus. Each voice was heard, each tribe had its place, a democracy born from the forest. Their system would one day inspire future generations far across the ocean. To the west, the Pueblo people still watched the stars from their adobe homes, farming the dry lands with ancient skill. In the Great Plains, the bison roamed in herds so vast that they darkened the horizon. The people followed their migration as they had for centuries, bound to the heartbeat of the land. The north was not silent, it was in harmony. Farther south, the Valley of Mexico glimmered beneath the high sun. Tenochtitlan, capital of the Aztec Empire, had become one of the largest cities on earth. Its canals sparkled with boats of flowers and fruits. Its markets teemed with thousands of traders. The people walked on streets made of stone and faith. Faith that the gods would keep the sun alive if humanity paid its due. Each temple, each ceremony, each offering was part of a cosmic balance. The Aztecs believed their world was the fifth and final stage, a fragile creation sustained only by sacrifice. They did not fear death, they feared cosmic silence. Yet alongside their ritual life bloomed poetry and art, words that spoke of love, nature, and the shortness of existence. In their songs, the Aztecs dreamed of flowers that never wilt, and hearts that beat forever beneath the sun. Their civilization, at its peak, was as complex and vibrant as any on Earth. In the Andes, the Inca Empire continued to grow, uniting dozens of nations from the deserts of Chile to the jungles of Ecuador. From their capital in Cusco, the Sapa Inca ruled as the child of the sun. Messengers ran across mountain roads, carrying the empire's heartbeat from valley to valley. The terraces glowed green under a sky of silver peaks. Machu Picchu stood in silence, a crown of stone wrapped in cloud. Untouched, unseen by the wider world, the Inca world was orderly, peaceful, and immense. Its people worked in harmony, believing their emperor sustained the balance of heaven and earth. To them, the world was eternal, the mountains unshakable, the sun unchanging. Farther east, in the depths of the Amazon, life followed different laws. Tribes along the great rivers lived in harmony with the jungle, their knowledge of plants, animals, and medicine more advanced than outsiders would believe for centuries to come. To them, the world was alive. Every tree had a spirit, every river a song. The rainforest itself was a cathedral, its canopy the roof of the world. Along the southern tip of the continent, in the lands of Patagonia and Tierra del Fuego, small bands of hunters moved through wind and ice. They had no temples, no kings, only endurance, memory, and firelight in the dark. Each region of the Americas, forest, desert, mountain, and plain, lived in its own kind of greatness. By 1490, the Americas had reached their height. 50 million people lived across these continents. Cities, empires, and tribes thrived, all without wheels, iron, or horses, yet with mastery of stone, water, and stars. They built civilizations that measured time more precisely than any clock, mapped the heavens without telescopes, and farmed land so efficiently that some of their crops would one day feed the entire world. It was a world vast, self-contained, and complete, 1,000 cultures bound by the same heartbeat, respect for balance. And then, beyond the horizon, sails began to rise. They were small at first, barely specks against the endless sea, but they carried with them a new age, one that would change the earth forever. The last night of the old world fell quietly. The fires burned as they always had. The stars shone over mountains and jungles unchanged, and across the ocean dawn was breaking.